All right, so suppose Montgomery Burns is a monopsonist employer in the town of Springfield, right? Now, suppose in this labor market dominated by Montgomery Burns, total surplus would be maximized if there were 1,000 workers and they all earned a wage of $20, right? So they all earned $20 and there's 1,000 workers, total surplus would be maximized. Instead, since Mr. Burns is a monopsonist trying to maximize his profits, um, he employs only 800 workers, and they earn $15 per hour, even though the value of the marginal product of labor at the 800th worker is $25 per hour, right? So what we want to do here for this situation is find what is the deadweight loss in this monopsony dominated by Mr. Burns, right? So I've drawn the graph here, and by the way, we're assuming that everything's linear, right? So marginal cost of labor, demand curves, supply curves, everything is just linear so that we have a deadweight loss triangle, right? It's an actual triangle that we can calculate the area using of the triangle using just simple rules from high school geometry, right? Okay, so the first piece of information we got was that total surplus would be maximized if there were 1,000 workers and they earned $20 per hour. So what that tells us is that where the labor demand curve meets the labor supply curve, that must be where there are 1,000 workers hired, right? So this is 1,000 workers hired, and they earn a wage of $20. So we know that the labor supply curve and the labor demand curve must cross where there's 1,000 workers and the wage is $20. Okay, so that's the first piece of information we need to calculate deadweight loss. The second piece is that we know that Mr. Burns is not actually hiring 1,000 workers, and he's only hiring 800 workers. And instead of paying them $20, he's going to be paying them $15. And we also know, the third piece of information is that the value of the marginal product of labor at the 800th worker is $25, right? So the value of the marginal product of labor at the 800th worker is $25. He's only going to pay them $15, which means that the labor supply curve goes through the 800th worker at $15. He's going to pay them as little as possible to induce 800 workers to work for him, right? And so here, once we have all these pieces of information, notice we have three different points, right? We have this 800 workers and the value of the marginal product of labor for them, for the 800th worker, is $25. That's one point. And then here's another point of the triangle at when there's 800 workers, the wage is 15. And then another point of the triangle is that where labor supply and labor demand meet, where total surplus is maximized, the quantity of labor is 1,000 and the wage would be 20. So notice those three pieces of information actually gave us 3 points of a triangle, right? Assuming that it is a triangle if everything's a straight line. So we can go ahead and calculate the deadweight loss here, right? Just calculating the area of this triangle, since we know the vertical dimension and we know the horizontal dimension, right? So notice that the vertical dimension of the triangle was the difference between the value of the marginal product of labor when there are 800 workers and the wage to induce 800 workers to work, which is 25 minus 15 or $10, right? And then the horizontal dimension of the triangle is the difference in the number of workers, so it's the 1,000 minus 800, which is 200, right? So that's why the deadweight loss is equal to the area of this triangle, which is 1/2 10 times 20, which is $1,000. So the deadweight loss in this monopsony labor market dominated by Montgomery Burns in the town of Springfield happens to be exactly $1,000. So we're done. Thank you for watching.